Hello, my name is Amy Upham, and I am a Master's in Public Health candidate at Lenoir-Rhyne University. And today we're going to be talking about the crisis at the border, which I think means different things to different people. We're going to be definitely talking about it today from a public health perspective. And I want to kind of ground us in reality about what it means for North Carolina, because many people think it's just an issue Texas or whoever deals with. But actually, North Carolina, between the years of 1990 and 2000, saw the highest increase in immigration across the country, which has meant that from 2000 to 2017, we have a lot of children of immigrants living in this state, whose parents may or may not be legal. In fact, 64% of our undocumented immigrants in North Carolina are Mexican, and that is very high. So if you think of the rest of the South, Virginia's rate of undocumented immigrants who are Mexican is 14%. Even Florida is lower than us. The only state that kind of comes close is Georgia. And we have about 205,000 undocumented Mexican immigrants in North Carolina, whereas South Carolina has something like 87,000. So it's an issue for us, and so we are potentially across the country, like we have been on HB2 and abortion, right to life bills, be seen as sort of a battleground state. And many of you might have seen in the news HB 370, which is a bill that would force sheriffs to detain immigrants upon direction of ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And of course, we have the sheriff from Buncombe and Wake counties, both not in support of that. And I think I read today, Governor Cooper is saying he's not in support, and he has heard from 97 sheriffs who are not in support. So it's not just the big cities. But part of that may be because they know that we have a lot of people who are here undocumented, and they don't want to see them all in their jails. So in 2017, 8.1% of our residents were immigrants. Now, that's not saying that they were illegal immigrants, and that's actually a tricky term, or I should say undocumented, not illegal. But it does speak to the volume that we have here. So what happens after detention? Sort of like in the news, there's all these child prison images that you're getting, and of course it's horrendous what is happening. It's a human rights violation, in my opinion, of epic proportion. As Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, if you don't like people calling them concentration camps, maybe don't run a concentration camp. Some of these facilities are actually in old Japanese internment camps. But once somebody is detained, the national average is about 65% are deported. A lot of this has to do with the Justice Department coming down and telling immigration judges, you have to clear 700 cases off your docket a year. It is much easier for them to deport them than to try to get the correct paperwork for them to stay. In Henderson County, there's a judge who deports 92% of detainees. And Henderson County has a high population of migrant farm workers, so the apples I'm picking. So that is a huge concern locally here for us. And if you add up the numbers, 60,000 children have been detained in the last 40 days, and ICE reports currently in May anyway, about 52,000 adults were in detention. And that is actually just a slight bit more than the maximum number of people we saw in the Japanese internment camps. And now during the Japanese internment, those folks were just relocated. They weren't sent necessarily back out of the country en masse. They were relocated. They didn't want them on the West Coast because of Pearl Harbor and whatnot. These people we are actually detaining and then sending back to sometimes horrible conditions. We are not relocating them internally. So let's get into sort of where they're coming from, who they are, why they're here. So it is true that we had a very, very sharp rise in immigration from 1990 to 2017. We went from about 30 million immigrants to 44 million. But since 2017, it started leveling off and has actually declined. And part of that are these arcane policies that are being put in place. But just in general, there's been a bit of a decline over the last couple of years. But the primary continent now that people come from is Asia. About 25% of our immigrants are from Mexico, but most of those people are actually sponsored by family. So you think about especially North Carolina, you have 8.7 or 8.1% rate of the people living here are immigrants, and many of them are Mexican. Well, they're coming here sponsored by their family, so they can technically actually apply for a green card and get residency very legally, which is why I don't like the term illegal immigrants. Most of these people are going through very legal avenues and being shut down along the way. Um, as far as asylum seekers, only 6 to 7% in the country of asylum seekers are Mexican. Right now, most current refugees that we're seeing are coming from Venezuela. And then the most approved refugee applications are from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so both of these countries are seeing a lot of unrest, political violence, and then in the case of Venezuela, a lot of hunger. But let's get into those asylum numbers. So that 6 to 7% only represents about 6,000 people. We had just shy over of 100,000 applications for asylum last year. And if we go to the next slide, you're going to see that 28,000 of those were from Venezuela. But 1.3 million people from Venezuela are being hosted in Colombia. Colombia has accepted 1.3 million, and they've opened up sort of refugee camps, which are more like tent cities than cages. But like you saw with Syria and whatnot, when that was going on, and those countries bordering them opened up, just refugee camps because they were just flooding in. And that is what is happening in Colombia. So we are sort of getting our britches tied in a knot about 28,000 asylum applicants. And it is true, many of them do go through Mexico. But again, the United States is denying almost all of those asylum applications. In the meantime, the US in January instituted an embargo on Venezuelan oil, which is where they get 95% of their food budget from. So they import most of their food, and so the people are starving. So we put that embargo on to try to force a different political regime to take over. It didn't work. It only made the situation worse, just like happened in Iraq many, many years ago. And so they are fleeing the country because there is no food. It's a lot. I went to a rally a couple days ago about this, and it's just incredibly emotionally disturbing what is happening, especially when you consider the scope of immigration nationally for other reasons. We issued over 37 million temporary visas last year for business and tourism. 28,000 Venezuelans want asylum. We're giving 37 million people. About 61% of those are Asian. No problem with Asians either, but what's the difference? What is the difference? Why are Mexicans who are applying not for asylum but just for citizenship or a green card because they have family here? What's different about them than the person who's a tourist, right? Or is on here for temporary business and ends up just tapping to stay. And of course, we've denied almost all of those asylum applications. Trump also wants to eliminate the diversity immigrant visa program. So this is a program that, again, small numbers, it's up to 50,000. It's meant for countries that we don't see a lot of immigration applications from. And so it's to try to diversify the country. He just wants to do away with that. He's talking how that's like a drain on our economy. I don't understand it. The numbers don't add up for me, right? 37 million can kind of just come in, do whatever, maybe make deals with oil companies that don't do us any good in our country or in Venezuela and then leave. But, diversifying our country isn't important. So really the question is who's next, right? Because, first it was like, oh, we can't have anybody flying in here from these certain Muslim countries. And then it's like, oh, these Mexicans are taking all of our jobs when like that's not even who's coming through the borders right now. It's like Venezuelans and El Salvadorians. And so first they came for who, right? And then they came for who. And I really just don't know. It seems like a wild card right now where the prejudice and racism is going to lie. with our administration. Uh, but there is a reason behind all of this. It's not just willy-nilly, I don't think. Um, it's about money. My opinion. This is my opinion. It's the opinion of many journalists that I've read. GEO Group, who is a large contributor to Trump's campaign, detains the vast majority of immigrants a day, comparatively to the other places. So they're housing about 1/10, of the um, adult immigrants, and that's about nine. Or sorry, no, not 1/10. Yeah, 1/10 of all immigrants. They're housing about 1/10 of all immigrants. That's 9,000. Um, and they are making $150 a day doing that from the taxpayer. This is not money that's coming from anywhere else but you and I. And you know, so but they don't have soap, right? They don't have toothbrushes. They don't have medical care. Um, they're being sexually abused. They are sometimes, if their parents are deported and they're not, they may be sold into the sex worker business. Um, Public detention centers in North Carolina are not much better. So the Mecklenburg Detention Center, which thankfully only holds about 2 people a day, but they make $124, or the taxpayer spends $124 a day to keep that person there. Wake County is a little cheaper, but they're housing more folks. And so, my thought is there is a crisis at the border, and it's not the immigrants. I'm going to end with a picture. We don't see a lot in the news or even on Facebook, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she does now is putting up every day on Facebook the names of children dying in U.S. custody. This is Wilmer Josue Ramirez Vasquez. I don't think that Wilmer is the name, so I think it's Josue. His mother brought him to the U.S. to get him medical care, and he died on May 14th in our government's custody, and he was 2 years old. So if you go on her Facebook, you will see these children streaming in on a regular basis. Another presentation would talk about, what to do. And there are things we can do, but this is just the public health awareness piece of this.